Hey everybody, welcome to Are We There Yet? Episode 17, Toxic. I'm your host, Susan Ruth.
And I'm your host, Mara Adelman, and we are two humans who are going to have the real conversation and raise all the questions that we all have about where there is when it comes to dating, relationships, and sex.
Ooh la la la.
Where's your there been, Miss Susan? What's new?
Same old, same old. I've been traveling a bit for different projects, and that's been a lot of fun. I am a bit worn out. I'm happy to be home for a hot minute and sort of enjoying my own bed. And I have to go to the grocery store. I have no food. You know, it's the thing where you eat as much as you can before you leave town, and then you get back and you think, oh, well, you know what? I think I need some snacks. The old Mother Hubbard here. Really nothing too exciting going on around here. Just more project stuff. How about you?
What about any time for dating? Have you found time? Are you busy going back and forth?
I have not had any time for dating. However, a couple of dates coming up.
Fun. Okay. You will report back.
I'll report back.
Report back.
What about you?
Totally. My there is I was discouraged because as always, there's a quiz in the links down below, and I took the quiz and I took it in a mindset of like several of my different past relationships or people I've dated, and they all come back as I have mostly been in toxic type situations or dated toxic people. And I already kind of knew it, but seeing it in black and white. And so essentially the definition, first of all, it made me feel better because there was a psychotherapist who did a study on it and pretty much said every single relationship has some level of toxicity. Nothing is perfect. There's always some work to be done, but we're going to get into categories in a little bit here about like, when is it not okay? And when is it just kind of normal being with somebody a long time and getting a little toxic in your communication, right?
You're there is feeling bad that you've had toxic relationships?
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of people you talk to have had relationships that were good for a period of time and then went downhill, right?
Right, or else I guess.
Yeah, and then they're no longer together. Mine were always good for a short period of time, and then I realized that this person was probably a bit toxic in their own way. It turns out that most toxic people are drawn to people who are empathetic, and I'm super empathetic, and so I'm actually drawing in people who then sometimes want to weaponize that and not be appropriate. Or also, I don't find myself to be a toxic person, but I can have toxic behaviors. I dated somebody who drank too much, and then we would have these weird arguments because he was drunk. And looking back, that relationship turned pretty toxic. And I was doing things like snooping through his phone and trying to find the hidden alcohol bottles, right? So if you're with somebody who's toxic, it can push you a little more toxic, right?
Make it crazy.
Make you a little crazy, yeah.
So this episode, everyone, is about toxic relationships. We should have.
Oh, sorry. We should have prefaced with that. Yeah. I figured the toxic title would give that one away.
Yeah, probably. Which is, by the way, Toxic, Britney Spears, one of my favorite pop songs. It's a perfect pop song.
It is really perfect.
Perfectly written. Anyway, I digress. Well, let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So I think what we all really want in dating and relationships is that our expectations are going to meet reality. And right, it doesn't work if you're dating somebody who's toxic,
right?
Like it's not going to ever work because their behaviors are never going to quite get in line with this picture you have of this type of relationship, right?
You think toxic changes depending on who the one man's toxic is another man's not toxic?
Hard to know.
Yeah.
I feel like when we get into this, there's a definite patterns of toxic.
Yeah.
And so we'll start with that. I actually kind of came up with like categories in my own head because there's lots of different concepts of toxic. So there's the people who are just ignorant of themselves and their own emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can't understand themselves, they can have toxic behavior just because they're spiraling because they don't understand themselves. Moving down into the gray zoners, which are slightly toxic, narcissistic. They make that your gut kind of twinge a little bit, but you never can quite put your finger on it.
Mm-hmm.
Moving down into the outright toxic, narcissistic behavior type people. moving down into like the truly abusive, physically, sexually, verbally, financially, right?
Mhm.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about all of those. The problem is sometimes people who are slightly toxic will sometimes become abusive down the road.
Mm.
And so the goal is to kind of tease out the toxicity and either work on it together and then
Sure.
choose to end it if it's not going to work, right?
And
And
how
so-
often have you been in a relationship where you said, this feels toxic, and they actually sat down and had the discussion?
No,
This is really happening. They're like, what the fuck?
most toxic people don't want to communicate well, right? And so we did an episode, Love is a Battlefield, episode 14. Go ahead back and listen to that if you want to learn how to not have toxic communication styles.
Mhm.
And so a big piece of people that are toxic is that they don't communicate very well. But we did a whole other episode on that. So we're just going to get more into like the which ones, what are the signs to look for. So for instance, I met somebody out recently in person, and I think we're going to go on a date, and he was fun. But I found myself sitting there because I had just gotten ready for this talk, like trying to tease out, like, is he showing any signs in the first like half hour of talking to him? So it's such a fine line of you want to be in the moment with somebody, especially when you first start dating them, but you also don't want to miss the red flags. So we're going to try and give you some of the big flags to watch for and then ways to fix it. So
I do think people show you who they are, though. I think if you're paying attention,
yes,
I think, and we're going to have an episode coming where if you're drinking or on drugs or anything like that, it may impair your judgment. We're going to do a whole episode on that coming up. But I think it is true that people show you who they are, even if it's glimmers
in between the representative, like you always say, they've got the representative on.
Yeah.
But now I have to fine tune, how do you be in the moment with somebody and just be having fun?
Yeah.
Instead of trying to have your like glasses on. Are you doing anything that can someday? So I'm going to figure that out for myself. And hopefully these lists that we're going to give you are going to let you know, are you dating somebody toxic? Are you in a relationship with somebody toxic? So the first one would be like lack of support.
Mm.
And so relationships should be based on this like mutual desire to support each other, to see each other succeed, to bring each other up. And people that are toxic, and I've seen this in relationships. I have a friend where I've watched this happen, where she was talking about something she was super excited about, and I watched him just like bring her down 10 notches. And my gut went, it's hard because it's a friend.
That's what mothers are for.
That's what, totally. Every mom I know. Is that what you wanted your hair to look like today?
Yeah.
That's actually a good way for people to think about it, because those kind of toxic kind of communication styles bring you down 10 notches. You should not feel worse after hanging out with somebody than you did before you met up with them.
And so across the board relationships, you don't have to be having sex with somebody to know that there are toxic people in your life.
Yes. Like we're talking about the dating portion today, but this could be sisters, brothers, family, friends. If you're seeing a lot of these signs in somebody, what it does, if I look back at all of my toxic relationships, when I got out of them, I felt about 2 inches tall. And then you have to build yourself back up again.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to do that to myself again, because we're all our own worst critic anyway. Mm-hmm. I'm good at bringing myself down sometimes. I don't need somebody else to continuously do that in a relationship. So
true.
If somebody is not showing you support for things you're excited about and can't kind of be your teammate,
or seem mad that you're getting ahead or jealous, that's a toxic trait for sure. Like they not outrightly say, oh, you don't deserve that, but they might be like, well, why did you get that and not me, sort of situation.
Yes. And when I was researching for this, the reason they do that is because they are not happy with their own life's trajectory. Sure. And so they have to bring you back down to where they are.
Yeah.
And so that person has their own work to do, right? To get themselves to the point where they can celebrate all of their partner's achievements.
Yeah.
Toxic communication, which again, referring back, you can go back to 14 to hear all the ways people toxic communicate. But, instead of kindness and mutual respect, most of the conversations are sarcasm, contemptuous. They can't control their temper.
Not the funny sarcasm, the bad sarcasm.
Oh, yeah. Funny sarcasm is good.
Because that would basically, I'd be out of everything.
Because you have good sarcasm. Your sarcasm has never made me feel icky.
No. It's not mean or cruel.
No, but when you're with somebody who is doing it on purpose, or they can't control their temper, and it's like, you made me mad, you made me ghost you. Icky.
Oh,
right?
that's like the gaslighting thing too. Or people, when you're on a date and they're rude to the wait staff, cringy. That's a no-go on the next, never a date again.
Right. But I think some people would look at that as like, oh, they would never treat me like that. Yes, they will.
They will eventually.
They will eventually.
They'll run out of whipping posts.
Yeah. And you will become their whipping post, which is not what relationships are meant for, right?
No. Unless you're into that kind of thing, but that's going to be an upcoming episode as well.
Which one? I missed that. Say again.
Unless you're into that kind of thing. And
totally. If you want to be whipped, we will be talking about that down the road.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No shame in that.
No shame in the whipping game. I think
there's a quote.
There's a quote. We'll make that a merchandise shirt. We'll make it a t-shirt. Definitely the envy and jealousy. So
yeah,
everybody feels some envy. Everybody feels some jealousy. It's normal. But when you're using that to bring your person down a bunch of notches, or you don't get to feel like you're yourself because you can't share with them that you want to go have lunch with a guy friend. Like that's toxic kind of jealousy, right?
Yeah.
And then what people end up doing is kind of withholding themselves from their partner. Well, I'm just not going to tell them that that's what I'm doing. If you find yourself not being able to really be open and honest with your partner because of how they might react, they have some work to do.
Yeah. I've been
in
that relationship. I can name a couple in the old in the 20s decade that definitely fell into that hyper jealous partners.
Yeah.
For no cause.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. Yeah. Anyway.
But that's because it's their own issues that they have to deal with, right?
Let me tell you a little secret. The people that are obsessed with you cheating are generally cheaters. I have found that to be true. The ones that think you're cheating are cheating.
Yeah.
And then they say, oh, I've been cheated on before. No, they're fucking cheating.
Yeah.
I would say like 79% of the time, it has been my experience that if they're accusing you of something that you're absolutely not doing, it's because they're doing it.
I believe that wholeheartedly, unfortunately, but yes. And so that goes into the controlling behaviors. They're trying to mind manipulate you. I think the controlling thing is really hard because when you're with somebody, there's a lot of back and forth that has to happen, right? Finance, if you're living together, finances back and forth. But that's different than somebody who's like, where are you? Where are you going? What are you doing? You can't go see that friend for lunch. They seem to have come from jealousy and lack of trust, but really that person just has to feel in control of you, which is weirdly also what they're doing when they're like, are you cheating? Are you cheating? Are you cheating? They're trying to change your perspective so you don't see that they're cheating.
Yeah, that's why I think these kinds of conversations are so important to have in the beginning if you can. You look around at a restaurant and you see people who are supposedly on dates or in a relationship and they're on their phones, they barely talk to each other or look at each other. And I think, gosh, that doesn't feel like a healthy place to be but I think maybe it's generational that some people are totally fine with that. It doesn't seem healthy to me.
It's not healthy, but I read a study once upon a time. I posted this out. If you're seeing that, most of the time it's because they've been together for over a year and
they're sick of shit.
They don't have anything to say to each other.
That's sad too. That's sad to me too. You want to think that the person you're with, I do believe that silence is also golden, that to be able to be comfortable with sitting with somebody and not saying anything is wonderful. And I think that certainly that is healthy, but I'm talking about avoidant.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk to this person.
Yeah.
Because
angry.
I don't have anything to say.
Yeah. Nothing to say. We don't want to ever get there. The goal of doing all these podcasts is someday when I meet somebody, if we figure out how to do it right, that after a year to 5 years to 10 years, you still like each other enough to sit down in a restaurant and have a fun conversation.
Yeah. Like each other.
Yeah.
Liking each other is like, I think of that a lot. I remember one time in college, I worked at a little diner type restaurant and this old couple came in once a week and they held hands. They didn't really talk to each other, but they came in, they sat down, they had tea, and they always had 2 chocolate chip, 1 oatmeal, because she liked chocolate chip, he liked oatmeal. And so she got the extra cookie. And they just sat pleasantly, looked at each other and drank their tea, looked out the window, didn't really talk, but just existed together. It was so adorable.
That feels different to me than people who are sitting there glaring or having nothing to say. They're being together.
They're intentional. It's an intentionality.
It's intentional.
Is that a word? Intentionality? I just made up a word. Maybe.
It feels like it is. They're being intentional about it versus people who truly just don't like each other anymore. That's the difference. Yeah. But going back to things we've talked about a bunch, part of that is allowing your partner to have space.
Yeah.
Not being controlling, not being jealous or envious, like we just talked about. I can sometimes get slightly controlling and jealous too, because I've been triggered by partners being inappropriate. And so therefore, then what happens is that person isn't allowed to have enough space. And when you don't have enough space, what would you have to say to each other at dinner when you've just spent 24/7 together? There's nothing left to say.
Yeah, it works for some couples. I've known couples who can be on top of each other all day long, work and play and life, and they're fine. And, I slightly envy that. I think but for me, I like, you gotta give me some room, baby. Let me miss you a little.
Yes. Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah. And so, and then what happens, of course, is when things aren't going well, then there's the resentment, holding on to grudges, and that just like chips away at intimacy. The frustration builds up. And then what happens most of the time, if you're in a toxic relationship, is you're walking on eggshells and you don't feel comfortable having the conversations, because every time you have the conversation, it doesn't go well. So why would you bother having the conversation? I was in a relationship like that in my 20s. It would always get ugly. I want to talk about this. And instead of having a conversation, the poke, and then you escalate and they're like, why are you escalating?
And they're really controlling the energy of everything. I've had a previous encounter with somebody that we weren't even dating, but he controlled the energy all the time, because if you said anything wrong or did something, he was so volatile that, so not in control of his emotions, that he would like freak out or not, or accuse you of things or whatever. And you're like, whoa. And I just remember always being so stressed out around that.
That is the biggest red flag that you're in a toxic relationship. If you're always feeling like you're on eggshells, your gut hurts, you're scared, you can't
be yourself. Yeah. Or you're a different self. That's the other thing. Or it's like, oh, I'm modeling my behavior. I'm modeling my personality to make it okay to be around you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, all
no more of that stuff.
Nope, I am never, ever, ever doing any of this again. I'm hoping that I will see all the red flags quicker and not do that. Because then, of course, you have dishonesty. And whether that's outright lies versus half truths or just withholding information, the reason people do that is, again, they can control you because they just withheld this information that you need to make a decision about them. But now you don't have that information, so you make a different decision and then come to find out they were withholding pieces of themselves. That's
the
representative, but it's dishonest.
Yeah.
And it's a toxic behavior. Dishonesty is a truly toxic behavior. And so it all goes down to patterns of disrespect. So it's disrespectful to do all of these things. But then if you've got things like purposely being late or purposely making a plan that gets in the way of something that you've done, just kind of disrespecting your time, your energy, your space, toxic, goes in the toxic category. Negative financial stuff. So trying to control your money or not
guilting you if you spend money on something, your own money on something.
That is totally toxic behavior. So yeah, I mean, it's hard again, because when people are together for a long time, you've got joint finances. Where do you draw the line? Where is it? Is it toxic if your spouse is like, I can't believe you just spent $100 on that. Let's talk about that. That maybe not toxic.
Yeah. If somebody is in financial issue and they're continuing to spend money, that's a whole other ball of wax. I don't think that's toxic. That's trying to have communication.
Yes. Yeah. Versus toxic might look something more like,
you know how it feels though.
It's a gut thing. Yeah. And a chest thing and a tightening of the shoulders thing.
And somebody, let's say, who is in rampant spending mode and not considering their partner and saying, I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want. That's toxic too.
Yes. Very
it's my
toxic.
money, but it's like a household finances, or somebody, if the partner has to continually bail them out or anything like that.
Yes.
That's certainly a toxic trait.
Actually, my niece went through that a lot with a partner. The spending stuff, there was some drugs involved, but yeah, it's super toxic because now you're constantly scared that you're not going to have enough money to feed your children, and it's toxic. Yeah, bad. I wrote down when I did my quiz, the good definition of toxic is a relationship that is void of respect, understanding, sensitivity, and effective communication.
Mm-hmm.
And so
I took the quiz too, that's down below.
Yeah.
And I did it twice. So I took it once as if I was with remnants, by reflecting on my most healthy relationship that I've had. And I took it that way, and it said, oh, congratulations on a healthy relationship. True, it was a healthy relationship. And then I took one and again, took the same quiz. And then I thought about my not so healthy. And it was like, yep, nope, terribly toxic.
So your gut
I could have figured that out for sure.
I know. At least you had one that was pretty healthy. I've had a couple that were okay, healthy in the beginning, but then turned toxic.
Yeah. And I think too, there was a couple of the questions say, how do they behave towards you in public? And really toxic people can put on a hell of a mask in public.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah. Going back to my family member, like we all love this guy and they got married, and it was like you couldn't see any of those cracks until they started cracking. I think deep down, if she would have understood herself better and felt the twinges and the twinges and the twinges, she might have caught it. But it was very hard to get out of that, because once you're in a toxic relationship, it's also very hard to get out of it.
And listen to your gut, because I've had experiences where I was in something and thinking, not quite being able to put a finger on it, but thinking something doesn't feel right. And I went to my partner, I went to my family, I went to my best friend, and I said, I think this is not good. And everyone said, oh, no, everything's fine. You're just overreacting or whatever. And I was younger or whatever. So but I think it's important to listen to your gut.
Yes.
If you're wrong, you're wrong. But if you're not wrong.
How did your partner? He said the same thing. You're being crazy. Also, no offense when somebody's like, you're being crazy and doesn't want to have a conversation about making you feel better about the situation. Toxic. Yeah. If they're calling you crazy.
To live and learn, my friend,
This is why we're here, to live and learn. I actually feel pretty confident that I will see things clearer in the future and can help other people. If anybody wants coaching on this stuff, I have had enough toxic relationships that I will never do it again. And I'm pretty sure I could spot it for other people, even if they can't spot. I can.
If you have a toxic parent,
yes,
that you were raised by as well, you confuse a lot of the communication, and you confuse a lot of the behavior, and think, oh, wait, is that love? Is that what's supposed to be? And it takes a while to undo that imprinting.
Very true. The one friend that I watch have toxicity sometimes had some growing up. And so she doesn't catch it. And then I will bring it up later because I can't help myself. Like, hey, did that ruffle you a little bit? Because I'm sitting there watching it and I'm all, I want to puke. And he's a very nice guy. That was his upbringing. So but it shouldn't be allowed to continue. And so when you catch toxicity in somebody, it needs to be a conversation. And at the end, we're going to talk about ways to fix that. So going back to that, the constant stress feeling. So if you, like you said, with that one relationship, if you constantly feel stressed, if you constantly feel like you can't be yourself, it's normal for life stressors to come up, but ongoing stress takes a huge effect on your body, your mental health, your work, your whole life, right? And so if you feel that way, listen to it, please. Yeah. And then anybody who's going to ignore your needs. So going back to what you were saying about, I think you were saying, sorry, my phone's ringing. Let me put that away. I got sidetracked. One of your partners, you were saying, kind of didn't listen to things that you needed in the relationship. I think you and I had a past conversation. And so there's
a few partners in my past where they minimize your feelings, and your needs and your fears, if you will.
Yes. They actually oftentimes turn around and weaponize your fears. And so, that is what bothers you. Let me see if I can kind of rattle you a little bit. And so, when you're trying to go along with everything your partner wants and it's still not good enough, and they don't care what you need out of any of it, that's not a relationship. That's a very one-sided situation.
Yeah.
I feel very subdued.
A bunch of people watching this right now are like,
I know. This is such a, wait, which ones? The ones that don't want people to figure them out?
well, maybe both. Maybe. I think for some, some people know they're being toxic. Some people just don't know. They just don't have the tools. They don't understand themselves, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
So.
And those, when we get to the end on ways to fix things, those can sometimes be fixable, because if they glean and learn and have some more self-awareness, that might be fixable. If you have somebody who has truly narcissistic personality disorder or any of those things, that's not fixable.
Or borderline personality.
Borderline personality, not fixable. And all of those things are going to bleed onto you. Again, your most important decision you make in your life is who you choose to spend time with, whether it's friends or family. They bleed off on you. So if you're looking at a long-term partner who is toxic, it's going to bleed off on you, and you are not going to be a healthy person when it's all said and done.
Yeah. So I recommend dogs instead.
Oh, totally. I'm like, I got my 2 dogs, a couple cats. Like, who needs? I was laughing because I do feel very subdued today. I think it's a tough topic, because both of you and I have gone through these things.
Yeah.
Not a very fun topic, but it's very important for people to be aware so that they don't do it. So, lost relationships. Because you're hanging out with somebody who's toxic, a lot of people will stop spending time with people that friends, family, because you want to avoid the conflict when they're saying, hey, are you okay with that behavior? And you don't want to have the conversation with them. And also you start feeling about 2 inches tall. So why would you want to go out and be with people when you aren't feeling strong within yourself?
Yeah. And a toxic person might also isolate you.
They do it on purpose.
Yeah.
They isolate you on purpose. And so that now you're isolated. And going back to what I said originally, is sometimes the toxicity and then the isolation starts to lead to actual abuse. Mental, sexual, whatever that looks like. And so this is like a precursor possibly. So don't miss the signs. You might start letting go of your own self-care because you're so worried about keeping the relationship okay and keeping this person happy that you're not taking care of your hobbies and yourself. And you're hoping that it will change if I just do a little bit better, try a little harder. Yeah. And this goes for men and women. Women can be just as toxic as men.
Oh, hell yes.
I haven't experienced that on a dating front because I date men, but I'm sure women can be nasty.
Yeah, more manipulative even, maybe.
More manipulative than men, probably. I would say so, yes. Yeah. And so, of course, you're hoping for change. I was listening to this interesting podcast, Nick Vile, and he was saying, have you ever heard the term fuckboy?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So you got the fuckboy.
Right now. No, I'm kidding. Joking.
Yeah, totally joking. So
I checked the camera. He's just there. There's a guy.
He's sitting in the corner. So essentially he was like, the difference between a fuckboy and a player are that fuckboys are the people who are naive about where they're at, how they're portraying themselves, not emotionally intelligent, and they're not doing it to truly fuck with you, versus a player who's like, I know what I'm doing. I'm here to play this game. I'm going to manipulate you knowingly, oftentimes for the purpose of having it turn into sexual activity of some sort. And so again, when you're hoping for change with somebody,
and fuck girls, by the way, it's not just
sorry. Yeah. It's called fuck boys, but it could be a fuck person. So I don't really want either of those people in my life anymore, whether you don't know that you're doing it, and especially if you do know you're doing it. But if you are hoping for change with a partner you're already with or somebody you're dating, if they're just a fuck boy and they're a little bit naive to why they are acting this way,
I don't know, call them a fuck boy.
Well, but the definition of that is somebody who's trying to get you to do something, generally sex.
Yeah, but aren't you, if you know they're a fuck boy, aren't you trying to get them to do that too?
Oh, yes. If you purposely are doing that, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's totally okay.
I feel like a fuck boy, you know what you're getting into, or a fuck girl. And with a player, you think maybe, oh, I can change them, or, I can reel them in.
But on the other hand, they're very manipulative and trying to reel you in. So if you're hoping for change, try to understand where this person's coming from, because oftentimes it's going to take counseling and therapy and coaching to ever get that person there, because you're always walking on eggshells. That's the next one, constantly, whether it's verbally, what you do in your space, how you dress, who you talk to. that is not a relationship. That is toxic and abusive. You should not feel that way in a relationship.
If
And
they're
so,
always right too,
yeah.
that's a big one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Always right. And will never say sorry. Do you notice that about toxic people? It's hard for them to apologize.
Or they say, I'm sorry you felt that way.
Yes. Yes.
Classic.
Classic. I'm so sorry you felt that way. Instead of, oh, I can see how my behavior could have caused you to feel that way.
Yeah.
It's such a mind fuck.
I know.
Right? But I've had plenty of those. I'm so sorry that you feel that way. Like, oh God. And it does. And then you start feeling like you're crazy because they're gaslighting you into thinking that you're crazy. So things like chronic put downs, you know, you look fat in that dress. But then you can also have things like very low grade, subtle criticism, the passive aggressives, like, oh, you always are like this, or
you always or you never, two bad ones. And then, but here's one, instead of, oh, you look fat in that, it's more like this, like, you gonna wear that?
Yeah, that's ugly. Don't do that.
Yeah, motherfucker, I'm gonna wear it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you ask,
wear it out the damn door, baby.
Wear this right out the door. Don't put me down. Don't make me feel small. Really, what it all comes down to is if you feel smaller with the person than bigger, sometimes you're gonna have moments where you feel smaller with somebody, but overall, you should be feeling bigger and happier,
seen and heard, and felt.
Respected.
Yeah.
Respected.
Yeah. You don't have to always agree. Absolutely not. That would be boring probably too. But to have healthy communication of why you're not agreeing and solution and resolution.
Yes. And I think you and I, we're still working on it, but we do pretty well. Like, you know, every now and then a little together. Yeah. I know. It's a hard thing to communicate with people, but you shouldn't feel like you're walking on eggshells.
And honestly, different people are drawn to each other all the time. I think in friendships with lovers, you tend to see that two totally different personality types get drawn to each other because it finds a balance between the two.
And it keeps it more exciting. Like you said, it would be super boring to never have a debate, never disagree, but it needs to be done politely with respect. And so is it possible to fix a toxic relationship? Yes. But again, I go back to if it's really toxic, you're looking at therapy, coaches, like it's not going to be a simple fix at all. And so the biggest things are both of you accepting responsibility for any of your toxic behavior and looking back at any past behaviors that led to things being toxic and conversating about them and trying to figure out how you stop that from happening. But again, truly, so again, if you're dealing with somebody in the gray zone of toxicity who isn't aware of it, they can probably do that. If you've got a truly narcissistic person, they are never going to accept responsibility for any of their pieces.
Yeah, that's tough.
I've dated somebody like that. And so if they are never going to take responsibility, again, red flag, toxic, just not going to be willing to fix anything, willing to invest and go to counseling and try to fix the relationship. The shift from blaming to understanding. And so if every time you're having a conversation and it's you did versus let's stop and understand why we are disagreeing. And these are all the ways that like you should be fixing it if it feels icky. Openness to outside help. So let's get a counselor, let's get a coach, let's get a mediator for these conversations.
Yeah.
They're not going well.
Yeah.
Have you done counseling with somebody before?
I have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Two different partners. Yeah. In one case, the counselor actually called me and she said, you know, this is kind of against protocol. She said, but this is, you're the Titanic heading toward an iceberg with this person. So, and I thought so. And I knew that was the case.
Yes.
I knew it. And, but it was nice to hear somebody else say it.
You knew it, but you were still doubting it, right?
No, you know, at that point, I wasn't. At that point, for me, counseling was about trying to wake this person up who was always asleep, who wouldn't take responsibility, who was really jealous, had weird anger stuff, just all this stuff. And I think at that point in my life, I had had enough previous relationship experience because it is about experience, right?
It is, yeah.
It takes time to understand. Oh, look, I get the nice little sunshine finally breaking through. And then it's gone because I mentioned it. That it takes time to figure out who you are and where you're grounded, and to be able to see when other people's behaviors are detrimental to you. Because I think when you're younger and more naive in relationships, and I mean, it can happen when you're older too, but if
Or when you're younger.
For myself, I can only speak for myself, is that I grew up in a household where there was a lot of toxicity. So I think a lot of my earlier relationships modeled that experience until I started to figure that out. And then I was able to leave relationships that weren't healthy much, much faster because I had figured some stuff out. It just takes time.
It does really take time. But my hope is that for the younger generation, I mean, we're on here doing this. Subscribe down below if you find it helpful. There's so many things out there now that can teach people how to do it sooner. Like, I wish I wasn't almost 50, finally really getting to the point where I can see it all clearer.
Yeah. And sometimes your counselors don't know. I was in a relationship and the counselor adored my partner, and I'm like taking crazy fucking pills going, no, this person is lying through their teeth to you and you are buying every fucking thing.
But like you said, they're
I felt crazy. And the only sort of I don't know, bonus thing at the end is after the breakup, and I had gone back to that therapist just for a final sort of follow-up. Right. And she said, that guy was the most cunning liar I've ever met. So she found out, I said, I told you, but he
didn't catch it till the end.
Beguiled her as well.
Did it make you feel better though? You're like, okay, even if the therapist couldn't see it, then I wasn't silly for going along for so long.
Yeah.
It's hard to see these things clearly sometimes.
But they're great gifts too. I mean, every relationship I've had has been an incredible gift of knowing what I do or don't want. We talked about that in other episodes. Yes. It sucks at the time. It's horrific at the time, but when you step out of it and look back, everything has its gift, in my opinion.
I 100% agree with that. And we're going to do it in the future. We're going to do one on green flags, because we always talk about red flags and what not to look for. But I have changed my thinking lately, and I just envision what I want it to look like.
Chris Evans.
You're Chris Evans.
My friend Chris Evans.
I definitely have changed the physical piece of it a bit more. Like, I used to have a very much more set type, and now I am finding myself liking a lot of different types.
I do too. Yeah.
Because we're getting older, I think. But what I'm really looking for is behavior, respect, character, integrity. And I can see exactly clearly what that would look like in a good relationship. So now the more you look at green flags, the more you will never accept red flags again. So we're going to do a whole episode on green flags.
You're much better at shutting that stuff down. And I look at dating a lot like when you're young and you first start drinking alcohol, for example, you're like, oh God, that tastes terrible, or oh, I like that, or whatever. And then as your palate develops, you get more expansive with your tastes and desires. And where you may never have drank a gin drink because, oh my God, gin when you're 19 tastes terrible.
Right.
As an adult, it's a damn good fine martini, So,
I hear you. I still don't love gin because it's too floral, but yes.
Oh, I'll recommend some. There's some others that are not.
Oh, yeah. I want the non-floral ones.
Yeah.
That was the best analogy I've ever heard. That was a very good analogy. Yeah. It's essentially your palate, your thoughts have all changed.
Yeah.
But I still can get in a little deep with, like we talked about, if you slow down, you get in a little too deep, you're still not seeing it fast enough.
I think part of it too is if you want it so desperately, you turn off your meter that keeps check on those things because you want it so badly. And that's a dangerous, indifference is a power source.
Yes.
It allows you to take a step back and breathe into something and really decide with the Spock brain instead of,
I am working on that because we've talked about it. I'm much more emotional, and I like the intensity that comes with having that chemistry and connection and compatibility with somebody. But that doesn't mean that they're necessarily a good person who's going to do the right things. But that intensity feels good. And then when it starts feeling intense towards a toxic bent, it's already hard to extract a little bit. And so again, slow dating, we've talked about it a million times. Eventually we're going to review the book 8 Dates.
Oh, I don't
which
know.
talks about how you, it's the Chapmans. We've talked about them in the past.
Yeah.
And they wrote a book about how you can have 8 slow dates once a week, and talk about all the important things before you ever get serious. And it's going to be hard probably to talk a male species into doing that. But my goal is to try. Like, oh, I like you. Okay, but now we're going to probably not do the whole book together, but we're going to talk. We're going to slow it down.
I can't imagine on a first date.
Can you imagine?
I'd be like, I have this book. Can we go through this workbook? I know we just met on, Raya, but let's.
But I'm going to think about each of those topics, those 8 topics, financial, emotional, and try to have those conversations before I dive in too deep. Because if not, now you're looking at how do you move forward once you realize you're in something toxic, which is annoying. And so you're supposed to not dwell on the past with this person and start repairing moving forward, which we know is hard. Once you already have all of that baggage and anger and resentment, moving forward and not revisiting the past is like almost impossible.
I know a couple that when they started getting serious with each other, they started going to a therapist when things were fine. And so they learned skills together with the therapist from the get-go in places of healthiness, so that when something came up, there was always already this established understanding that, oh, we can work on this stuff. And I thought that was brilliant, because nobody thinks, oh, let's go to a therapist when we feel fine.
I freaking love that. I have actually recommended that to clients that were newly dating because they came from such different backgrounds that it felt like if they did that, they were going to be more successful. And I truly believe that prevention is the key. Like, don't ever get to the point where you feel so angry that you can't do it. And I'm only going to date somebody who thinks it's okay to go to a therapist, because
therapy's great.
Men that go to therapy are so evolved. Humans
that go to therapy.
Sorry, yes. But for me, when I'm going to date a man, I can tell the difference
in
how they interact with people based on whether they've ever done therapy. And so it is not a bad stigma to go talk to somebody to figure this stuff out.
I wish it was less expensive so that it was more readily available to people. We have to really work on that. Not you and I, but the world. We have to work on that problem to let that kind of healthcare come down in price so that more people are encouraged to go.
If it helps at all, being in the medical field, I'm seeing a total cycle switch to all of a sudden, wow, mental health. Our clinic got us all counselors because as medical providers during COVID times, Kaiser Mental Health are picketing because they don't have enough staff. So eventually the lens
just right now.
I know what?
Humans are just anxious.
So there's not enough therapists, but I'm feeling like the pendulum is going to swing towards, we really need to support mental health moving forward.
I hope so.
So it'll be 5 years, because that's how long everything takes in medicine.
Your lips to Spock's ears.
Yes, I want this to be true for everybody. Everybody deserves to have a therapist if they want one.
Absolutely.
So down below in our links, we put options to counseling and to things like
the quiz. See if maybe you're in a toxic relationship. Also, you can subscribe. That's pretty great. Subscribe to us.
Yeah, subscribe to us so you can hear our next videos coming out. Down below, we put links to like the National Domestic Violence Hotline. We put a bunch of videos. It's funny, they went in order. 5 signs you're dating a toxic person. 6 signs you're dating. But there's a bunch of
signs. That's hilarious.
There's a bunch of videos down below to help you decide if that's something that you're dealing with. Make sure that in those moments you're practicing healthy communication. So going back to our 4 horsemen and the bad communication styles we've talked about in past episodes.
But the urge to be toxic does show up. I know that when I get a text from somebody that's ghosted me after a long absence, and then they're like, hey, what's up? My urge to be toxic back definitely is definitely there, but I try not to be.
That's my point, is that if you're with somebody who is being toxic, they can drag you down to the muck with them.
Yeah, in the relationship.
Who wants to be in the muck? I don't want to be in the muck.
Yeah.
So we all have toxic traits, and we can all be toxic and have toxic behaviors.
Right.
But there are people that are just truly toxic because they don't know better, or they are doing it on purpose.
Right.
And so make sure that if you're in a relationship and it doesn't feel like you guys are ever going to be able to heal together, that having a trial separation and trying to heal individually is totally okay. Separate, counseling, and if you want to try and come back together. I did work with somebody who they did that. They got separate homes and they shared their child and they both went to counseling, and she had shared that some stuff was toxic. And then 2 years later, they moved in together and they're doing amazing.
Oh, great.
It was like a restart.
Love to hear that. That's good.
Yeah. I always get bummed out when people go straight to divorce without thinking about a separation first.
Mm-hmm.
There's often times where a trial separation and counseling can bring you back together for sure. And so ways to leave a toxic relationship. If you're truly in a toxic relationship or anything abusive, you need to get out while the getting's good, and you need to do it in a safe manner. So ways to do that is therapy. There's domestic violence advocates. At my clinic, we have NEWS, Napa Emergency Women's Services, where they do restraining orders, counseling, and they have
safe houses.
They have that same place
for men and women.
Oh yeah, this is for all genders. Yep. Women can be very abusive as well.
Oh yeah,
very abusive. And so find yourself one of those resources and talk to your loved ones. I was in an abusive relationship once, and I didn't talk to anybody about it because I was shamed. I felt shameful that I wasn't able to fix it myself.
Yeah.
And so I was very young. Nowadays, if something happened, I'd be like, oh my God, look what just happened. Let's talk about it. But it's okay to talk to your loved ones. If you don't feel like you can have a safe conversation with that person, bring a friend, bring a mediator, bring a witness. If it starts feeling abusive at all, get out. If somebody hits you once, they're going to hit you again unless they have serious therapy. If you feel like your self-worth is in the dumps, oftentimes that person has been being toxic and making you feel that way. Yeah. Yeah, I'm very subdued on this topic. Sorry, everybody.
It's a heavy topic.
It's a heavier topic for sure. And
it's an important one to talk about. Definitely.
Yeah, super important.
So definitely, everybody check out the references below in the information, and take care of each other and take care of yourselves. And if you are in such a relationship, it can be scary, it can be isolating, but you're not alone. You can always, send us an email and we can send you information. What's our email, Mara?
It is email Awty, AWTY @gmail.com.
Right.
Yes. Send us emails for future topics, any questions you have, any stories you want us to share on here, things that resonate with you. And yes, if you need any assistance in finding help, feel free to email us. I was going to leave us with a quote. Nora McInerney. Have you ever heard of her?
I don't know.
She has a podcast, Terrible Thanks for Asking. It's a very
that's a great podcast.
It's a great podcast.
Yeah.
And she just wrote a book called Bad Vibes Only, which is not actually what it's about. But essentially, sorry, my dogs are barking. Shame on them. This was her quote. Her concept that the future ahead of you is not boundless and never. Sorry, I'm getting it wrong. Every choice we make eliminates a future version of ourselves. If we're in a bad pattern, we need to ask ourselves, do we want to be having the same conversation with ourselves in 10 years? And so if you're in something where this doesn't feel healthy to you, think about in 10 years, do I want to be doing the same thing?
Yeah, right.
Do I want to reverse course here? Reverse course.
Yeah. Oh, dogs are alerting you to something.
It's exactly 4:31.
That's dinner time.
And they often get fed at 4:30. How do they know these things?
They wear little watches.
They wear little watches. And when the time change, it really messes them up.
The cat walks by and says, hey man, dinner time,
No, and my cat right around 8 o'clock every night starts going and playing with a toy ferociously, usually while I'm on the phone with a patient or a client. So we will shore this up so I can go feed the beast.
Thank you for all this great information, as always.
My hope is that somebody will listen to this and realize that they have some work to do in their relationship or to get out of a relationship.
Or they have a friend that's in an issue or a family member. So
yes. And sorry, go ahead.
I was to say, sometimes you need somebody on the outside to with a hand to reach in to the circle, because you do feel so isolated. And so, if you do see somebody, if someone you love or somebody a friend or coworker or whatever, something seems up, follow your intuition, be safe yourself. But sometimes people just need someone to say, hey, are you okay? Can I help? Is there something going on?
Yeah, I think it's important to do that with people, and it's okay to do that. And in 2 weeks, we are going to be talking about stages of relationship. So oftentimes people get confused because relationships change 0 to 6 months, 6 to a year to 5 years, 5 to 10 years. And I think if we can understand the stages of relationships better, that you'll be more likely to understand when something's truly toxic or where you're just going through a normal power struggle phase in your relationship. And
Sure.
so we're going to talk about that in a couple weeks. And yeah, I hope everybody has a great day.
Be well, stay connected. I love you, Mara. Thank you.
I love you. Stay well, and everybody stay connected. Be well.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Subscribe.
Subscribe.